This is Cyber Smokehouse, and I'm Ernie.
And I'm Graeme.
Join us as we grill the minds, dig into the experience, and serve up the stories of leaders in cybersecurity.
Cyber Smokehouse is sponsored by TBD Cyber, a cybersecurity strategy consulting firm. We're excited to be speaking to today's guest. He's a cybersecurity architect, security strategist, author, and educator. He leads enterprise security architecture initiatives, including zero trust transformation, automation, and large-scale risk reduction programs. He's driven measurable impacts, improved efficiency, reduced data exposure, and supported hundreds of millions in secured outcomes. He is the author of Secure by Habit, with an upcoming book on zero trust and automation-driven security. He is a senior security architect at Frostbank. Clete Taylor, welcome to the show.
Thank you, guys. I'm glad to be here.
All right, let's light the fire and crank up the heat in the smokehouse. Clete, we like to dive right into it and hit the hot topics. So I'm going to ask you a question. What do you think are the biggest challenges for the industry in cybersecurity these days?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is just keeping up with the change of pace, because cloud, we have SaaS now, remote work after the pandemic, of course, supply chain dependencies, and just the increased amount of automated attacks, mostly powered by AI. But because of that, I think we've fallen into a trap of tools instead of addressing root cause. The root cause is always we gave too much trust somewhere. We've allowed too much network traffic. We've allowed too much access to one individual. It usually falls down to that as a root cause. Because of that, we deal with security after the fact. We don't get in front of it. We wait until something bad happens. Then we have a tendency to go buy new tools. But AI and quantum, they're both coming. We know they're both coming. AI, we talk immensely about because it's the thing this year. But quantum encryption is something that's on the horizon that's coming faster than most of us realize. We've been told in the past, we got to have it done by 2035. Then we were told 2030. And now researchers are telling us 2029. And that is primarily to asymmetric security. But those are what I see as our biggest challenges, plus growing security individuals that have more than just technical skills. In today's environment, we've got to know the business. We've got to know people. And most of what we do, whether we like to admit it or not, is influencing people to make the right decisions.
So you've hit on a lot of good, I think, topics there that we can unpack. And one of them is near and dear to my heart about people just have a tendency to just go see a problem and go buy more tools. And I have kids, and I always tell them, guys, before we go buy more things, what about playing with the tools you already have or the toys you already have? Or can we get rid of some of them before we buy more? And I feel like we have to say the same thing to our security practitioners. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Oh, absolutely. What ends up happening in most organizations is they'll buy a tool. It doesn't work the way they want or the way they thought it was going to work because the vendor told us it was going to work a certain way and would solve all its problems. So instead of bucking down and saying, you know what, let's figure out how to use the tool right, we go buy another tool. And a lot of times we don't get rid of the old tool. So we end up in situations like we have 3 SD-WAN vendors. We have, 2 vulnerability scanners or more. We have different processes for different areas. And we end up with a lot of dysfunctional, individual siloed solutions that don't ever really address problems.
So when organizations are thinking about this zero trust journey, and I know it's a journey, right? It's not something you can do overnight. There's network, there's identity, there's endpoints. Where would you recommend they start, or does it really matter?
Really, I think they need to start with an understanding of what the 5 pillars of zero trust are trying to do: data, devices, networks, apps, and forgetting one. But anyway, devices, networks, apps. But understand where your current tools fit in those pillars and then start working through. I like using the CSA protect surface model. You start with one protect surface. Don't start with your on-premise environments because they're far too complex and they're probably too antiquated to actually get to zero trust. Start with like a SaaS or your cloud environment. Then map all of your tools and all of your controls to what each of those pillars are trying to do for that protect surface. Once you get through that exercise, you start with identity always first. Then you go to devices. Then you add networking. Then you go to the app. And then finally you go to data. And once you've gotten through that journey at least once, you have a much better understanding of what it's going to take for your enterprise to implement zero trust, and also where you may have gaps that you have to address. But don't go buy tools first. Don't listen to a vendor saying, hey, I can deliver zero trust. No single vendor can do that. Zero trust is a mindset. It's a set of principles around making trust decisions. It's not a tool. So, that's generally where I start is let's start by evaluating what we have and looking at a protect surface and figuring out how we can build your first zero trust architecture without buying any.
When a couple of years ago, when we were really, high on the zero trust kick, that would drive me bananas. Is when people would really push the, buy this platform and you'll adopt zero trust. And Clete, I 100% agree with you. It's more of a philosophy and lifestyle, like eating healthy and a journey than buy said tool. So, yes, preach.
Zero trust, you brought it up. It's a journey. There is no ever done with zero trust. You make an iteration, you evaluate what you did, you improve, and you do it again. And you do it again and again and again, because zero trust is that mindset. So it's flexible. It's not future proof, but it's future resistant. Because you have this mindset in place, you're able to adapt much more rapidly to changes in technology or threat landscape.
So Clete, I got a question. So, Graeme and I had done some advisory, we had customer advisory boards on a prior company. And one of the feedback we got was some of the CISOs just kind of got tired of the zero trust conversation just because their boards, they all talk to each other and everybody was hammering them on zero trust. So nowadays, how do you sell that internally and pitch that you're going to do this zero trust mantra, or you're still going to adopt it? I mean, how do you get everybody on board?
Well, you got to frame it in ways that the business will understand. So instead of talking about breach containment or control expansion or speak about any of the pillars, talk about what the business is going to get out of it. Talk about how by adapting yourself to a different mindset, you're going to build a system that allows access to the applications they need while eliminating or reducing the potential for when something goes wrong for it to be actually damaging. It's not a revolutionary concept. It's an evolutionary concept. I rarely begin talking using the term zero trust. I start talking about making trust decisions more business friendly and more impactful to the business. So having them look at what am I trying to actually do, and how can I prevent what will happen in the future at some point from being impactful to my bottom line. So, and that's the goal of zero trust, is to actually reduce that financial impact of an inevitable breach. We assume, and we have to assume, that at some point somebody's going to breach us in some way, and it's going to cost real dollars. So by using zero trust as a cost containment and a business driver, you're able to drive that. Plus, zero trust allows organizations who have had trouble being agile enough to adapt to the business, because the zero trust model, you take your trust decisions no matter where you put them. So you could be on premise, you could be on the cloud, or you can be on on-prem cloud or in a SaaS. It doesn't matter. Those same trust decisions, those same trust models will travel with it. So it allows that agility for the business to innovate faster.
Do you think we'll get to a stage, Clete, where we start talking about zero trust, and this is just kind of good security hygiene.
Yeah, as a zero trust is going to become the inevitable security model. We all recognize today that the castle mode security model we primarily use today is fundamentally flawed for today's world, because the castle mode assumes your internal networks are safe. And that's just not the case. And people don't attack the perimeter. They attack identities. So instead of trying to break your firewall, they're trying to figure out a way to get Ernie to let them have his credentials, or to be snooping once they've done that and they're living on the land, to be able to snoop and steal credentials for applications so that they appear as legitimate users, and our perimeter tools just don't see them.
Yeah, and I mean, the whole identity space is getting even more complicated with non-human identities now, right? Because, depending on which survey you look at, it's somewhere between, 40 to 90 non-human identities to human identities. And we're talking about APIs and bots and AI agents and service accounts all trying to act and get access to things. So what's your perspective on that? I mean, how well does zero trust architecture help address some of those challenges?
Yeah, because zero trust uses all 5 pillars at once to make every trust decision, you're no longer quite at the vulnerability of having an API token stolen and them using those credentials for that API to appear as a legitimate user. That API token is tied to the identity of the API. It's tied to the physical location that the API is coming from. It's tied to the network path that API should follow. It's tied to the behavior that the application says that API should do, and it's tied to the data that it should actually have access to. So in a traditional attack, it relies on us not having network controls. It relies on us not having application controls that say, this identity shouldn't have this capability, and they're trying to do this. And same thing with the data. It shouldn't be able to access this data, or it's trying to do something with the data like a bulk exfiltration that it shouldn't be allowed to do. So zero trust addresses that by making these trust decisions reliant on multiple points of origin. So we're not just relying on identity like we are today. Today, our assumption is you authenticated, you're fine. Now, to authenticate from a device that we know and it's healthy and it has the right certificate and you're doing the right thing in the application and you're following the right network path and you're accessing the data in the way that you're supposed to. So that's how zero trust deals with this. It makes us look at every activity much deeper to understand the business logic behind it, to understand the proper behavior, and it allows us to then establish our policies and rule sets so that if somebody does steal a security token, it's useless to them. Plus, zero trust insists on session tokens. So they're the days of a long-lived token are behind us. Now, every time that an API wants to make a call, it's got to establish a new session and a new cryptographic API or cryptographic token. So those tokens that are just sitting out there that somebody stole 2 days ago, well, they're completely useless. This is going to take you a time as an organization to modify your behavior to get there. But every step you take gets you closer and closer to that and moves you farther and farther away from that risk profile that we live today.
Interesting. So Clete, how about for someone going down this journey and for someone that's done it before and has a lot of experience here, what would you say are some of the biggest pitfalls to look out for and to give someone advice that's going to go down the zero trust journey for their org?
Yeah, the biggest pitfall, well, there are really 3 that I see. And I always come back to this one as the first one. Don't trust your vendors. Your zero trust architecture is yours. They should fit into your architecture. So whatever they do, understand what exactly they are doing. Where are they making the trust decision? In what pillar? for what purpose, and how will that integrate into your overall security architecture so you can make these trust decisions that span across all the pillars for every activity. The second is, don't bite off more than you can chew in one sitting. Many organizations will rush right to like the CISO model, and they'll follow the DoD COAs, which I do recommend you do at some point in your future. But don't worry about the CISO maturity level that you're in. Worry about where you're at today and how you're going to improve tomorrow. At a point, you will say, hey, you know what? I can now compare myself to CISO's initial maturity model. But until you get there, don't bother with it. Don't think about it. Understand the concepts, but don't try to sell yourself in biting off more than you can chew. And then also understand you're never done. Don't walk in thinking this is a project. This is a journey. It's going to take time. You're going to change fundamentally a lot of IT processes along the way. Change control is going to change. ARB boards are going to change. Remediation cycles are going to change. The need to shift left in everything you do is going to be a huge cultural shift for most organizations. So be prepared for those types of things. It's not easy. It's hard work, but it's worth it. And it's something you get tangible benefits from right away and at every stage along the way.
And then, we talk about the pitfalls, but what about company size and organization? So is this something that only, Fortune 500 companies are doing, or is it smaller orgs that, that may not have a Clete who's a, veteran security architects on staff? I mean, can small orgs adopt zero trust philosophy as well?
Yeah. For smaller organizations, you are going to be relying a lot on the tools you already have, but you follow the same discipline. You still look at everything you do, even if you only have 5 applications. Well, it makes your life is going to be a whole lot easier. You only have 5 protect surfaces. So for those, you map it out, figure out where you're making your trust decisions, figure out within the context of your organization, how you can make those trust decisions better, and then be okay with that. You don't have to be perfect at zero trust. You just need to be trying. Because as you try, you'll get better, and it'll become more and more relevant to you, and your tools will go a long way towards you. A small organization using something, say, like Zscaler may be enough, along with some network changes that will reduce blast radius, so those 5 applications can't talk to each other. So that if you have an attack, you're not dead in the water. A small organization is impacted even more by a breach than a larger organization may be, because a larger organization has a large security staff that can respond. A small organization may only have 1 guy. So let's ask you a question. If something goes wrong, how can I build the system so that it's resilient, not repellent? We concentrated on repelling attackers instead of being resilient to attacks. And that's a fundamental change.
Okay, last question on this topic for me is, if you were starting off, you mentioned a couple of places where you go, but what would be the go-to reference, or a couple of places where people would go, read, research, better understand?
To understand the basics of zero trust, I would recommend 2 sources. And that's mostly because of the modern landscape. NIST is the organization that has defined zero trust, and it is very wordy, it's very academic, it's very abstract. CSA, the Cloud Security Alliance, has a very good write-up. John Kindervall actually influenced the development of CSA. And if you don't know, he's the guy who invented the term, and he invented the concepts of zero trust. But he's had a huge influence on CSA. It's focused mostly on cloud type applications, but they apply across any type of application. But most organizations today are moving to the cloud. So it gives you a good leg up on being able to secure your cloud environments very rapidly, and they have a lot of good resources there.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, let's pivot a little bit to a different topic. And you've obviously been in the industry for a long time, probably led a lot of different teams. So we're kind of interested to learn a little bit about your leadership style. What are the 2 or 3 things that, as you lead teams, that you like to do in terms of your style?
Yeah, at first I like to be absolutely clear with everybody. I make sure the team knows what our mission is, what our priorities are. And I'll relate a real quick story. When I took over Security First Network Bank, the first thing I did when I walked in the data center is I asked people what they did. And of course they said system administrator, security administrator. I'm saying, you're wrong. You're a banker. Get people focused on what the business does, and then have them understand what good looks like, because many times perfection gets in the way of good enough, and they can't be perfect. I try to build my teams to be resilient. So I like them to understand what their expectations are. I like to make sure that they understand that no matter what happens, at the end of the day, it's my fault. And our goal is to not make me be so stupid next time. But the thing is, they need to understand that you're there to support them. You have good expectations. You remove blockers out of them. And you create a place where it's safe for them to experiment and make mistakes. Especially young people, gonna make mistakes. Even I make mistakes every day. I make a mistake, and then I have to go fix it. But you need to be there to help them with that. You need to help them understand that their soft skills are as important or more important than the certifications they have. They need to learn how to listen. They need to learn how to communicate. They need to be able to learn how to influence people without preaching to them.
Yeah, I love the understand the business. I think that's really critical. I think not enough people in technology roles that know how the business makes money. What are the key kind of business drivers? If you understand that, you can really tie what you're doing back to what the business is doing. Yeah,
and I think having that focus leads to a lot of frustration in security professionals. We all have been there. We get so frustrated with the business or with IT because they want to do something that we label as absolutely stupid. But the bottom line is they're making a business decision in many cases. And the risk of our assumption, this is a really dumb idea, is usually incorrect. We are misunderstood on our part, because they look at it and they say, okay, if this bad thing happens, I can live with that because I get a bigger benefit over here. Understanding that the business at the end of the day is going to make that call will free you from the eggs.
Absolutely. So as you're looking for talent to add to your teams, how do you find people, and how do you kind of I mean, there's a perception out there. I'm not sure that I believe it, that there's a shortage of security people. But what's your perspective on that? How do you find the right talent to bring onto your team?
Identifying skills is easy. And we can all do that on LinkedIn. They have a list of skills. Okay. But what we try to do as we're interviewing people and as we're bringing people on board is we try to understand the whole them. So we want to understand how they problem solve. We want to understand how they communicate. And making that clear in your job descriptions, that that's a part of the job, helps people go, okay, I don't want that because I want to be an engineer. When I'm searching for architects, I'm looking for something different than most people are. Most people are looking for a senior engineer. I'm looking for a change agent. So I'm looking for visionaries. So I need to see that type of things in their resume. Have they taken on new challenges? Have they been at the forefront of something? Like through my career, I've always been willing. When Graeme Leach-Bliley came out, people were saying, "What's Graeme Leach-Bliley?" I'd say, "I know it. I had no idea, but I figured it out really quick." Don't be afraid to take that challenge. And also look for those type of people. Look for people who have a personality fit with your team. And that's very important. We always interview first with us and then with the team. We want to make sure they're going to fit in and have a really solid understanding of where they're going to fit in initially and where you see them growing to. We just hired a guy, great engineer, really good architect, but we envision him eventually moving into a manager role because he has kind of that background and that leadership style. But I always look for those soft skills and how those soft skills are going to fit in our environment.
Yeah. So the cultural fit's so important. So, I think you really emphasized that. Yeah.
Well, and Clete, how about I think you mentioned in our we spoke before this that you're a hybrid, mostly remote working environment. How do you guys communicate and how do you foster that culture and make sure the team's talking? How does that work for you?
We have an ongoing conversation on Teams. We have a team channel just for that, and we consciously make the effort every morning to greet each other, share what happened overnight, everything else. We get our coffee time virtually that way. And it's not unusual for somebody in the morning to make a Teams call to me just to have, some time to chat. We consciously make the effort to understand who the person is, what their challenges are, not just at work, but in real life and what their celebrations are. So we do that a lot. Plus we have scheduled FaceTime via Teams, like we are right now, where we can see each other's body language, where we can see each other's faces. And part of our culture is if you're in a meeting at Frost, you have to have your camera on. You don't sit there behind a make-believe wall. No, you're sitting. Over time, people adjust to that culture and they get to the point where this is like I'm sitting in the room. And we're less formal because a lot of times when you first start doing it, you're very formal on the conversation. You're afraid of doing something or, that's going to get recorded. I don't want to say that. But make it as a leader, it's incumbent on you to set that tone, to make it conversational, to make it friendly, to make it camaraderie, to build that camaraderie. Plus we do schedule when we are in the office together. We do scheduled time together. We have lunches together. We have dinners together. We celebrate together. We cry again. And making sure we're interested in everything, not just the job. Much like you would in the office, you're sitting in the morning, you're having your coffee, you talk about what they did last night, you talk about ball game. We do the same thing virtually, but it was a conscious effort on our part to get there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's funny with the cameras. I'm in a disadvantage being on the West Coast because everybody wants to schedule early morning calls, and I personally like to turn my camera on all the time, and I always do it. And typically get a lot of calls at like 6 or 7 in the morning, but I just say, hey guys, what you see is what you're going to get. And sometimes it's, I roll out of bed and there's a hat on, but I always turn on the camera just for that exact reason. I think you really do build a relationship as best as you can with that camera on. So I think that's a good policy. And we try to do the same thing as well. I want to switch gears on you. So you had mentioned a couple things about really emerging technologies in the beginning. I think you'd even touched on, quantum AI, and those are a lot of the buzzes that we hear. But what excites you about emerging technologies, and what concerns you about emerging technologies that are coming out?
Well, what excites me and concerns me is the growth of AI and LLMs and agentic AI, things of that nature. It's very exciting from a security practitioner standpoint because it is multiplying our capability. We're able to do with human oversight the same amount of inspection and analysis as we could with, say, 5 or 10 analysts. But it requires that human insight. Like what we're doing at Frost is we're seeing a huge increase as we move towards zero trust of telemetry, because we're looking for more signals. But that would mean in our everyday world today that we'd have to have more analysts to deal with it. Having AI there that we can train to say this is expected behavior, this is anomalous behavior, and have them do the grunt work is going to be a godsend to security. Of course, the concern is AIs have a capability to hallucinate. They have a capability to jump guardrails, and they're going to try. So, AI is one of those things that is a two-edged sword. But I do see on the future, strictly from a security standpoint, that we'll be able to develop more adaptive controls so that our control system, our zero trust system, will be able to respond in real time to events as they happen, even if they were unexpected or unknown ahead of time. So that's what really excites me is the ability to automate these playbooks to provide, even tighter feedback loops than we have today for detection and response, especially because the attackers are going to be speeding up. And when quantum computing comes here, right now we're saying, nation states are our biggest threat. But, I saw just the other week where people were making a do-it-yourself quantum computer stack, where you can use standard computers to do quantum activities. And that should be a concern for people. Is, any technology right now, we look at quantum as being something that requires huge hardware and requires a big data center that uses a lot of water. But people are clever. They're going to figure out how to do quantum-like things on lower cost platforms. So what we today say is going to be limited to nation states and then big criminal organizations, it's going to be quicker than we think that script kiddies are going to have the ability to use quantum attacks against us. So that really worries me. The speed of change, is going to keep accelerating. And think about it I'm not going to go back as far as I can go, but let's start with when the internet came in. It took about 4 to 6 years before the internet really became a thing. Then the web came along, 2 years. Then, the next thing came along. It was 1 year. AI? Oh, it'll be 2 to 3 years. No, it's 2 to 3 months. What's the next technology going to do? And how fast is it going to disrupt? So we've got to learn how to be, what scares me a little bit is we've got to learn how to be even more adaptive and reactive. So the speed is going to be important in the next 10 years, as well as accuracy. So not only do we have to be accurate, we have to respond in near or real time.
Yeah, that's great. I agree with you. I mean, I think the speed of change is just accelerating all the time. All right, so Clete, how do you keep up to date? This is a ever-changing field, right? How do you, what do you read? Do you listen to podcasts? Do you do your own research? How do you keep yourself informed?
A little bit of all. I do work on working groups with CSA and NIST. So I'm able to talk to researchers periodically and hear what they're thinking is coming next. And that's where I focus, is what's next. I don't spend as much time as I used to on current techniques for responding to threats or responding to attacks. I rely on the engineers to do that. Me as an architect, I see my role as what's coming in anywhere from 6 months to 6 years. So I do spend a lot of time with NIST, the CSA, other organizations. I read scientific papers. I do a lot, and I read Science Daily and look not only at what I'm really concerned with, which is cybersecurity and technology, but I also look at the other things and look for how is this going to impact the drive of the market. What is this research over in, say, genetic medicine? How could that impact the IT world because they're needing something new, or they're needing a new thing, or how might this actually impact our ability to do security? So I spend a lot of time reading scientific papers. And then, of course, I also read blogs. I look at LinkedIn. I read pretty much everything the vendors put out and try to read between the lines to get the common story. Because, we all get marketing fluff from vendors, but if you read 5 of them, you'll get 2 bits of nuggets of information that you might not have looked at that way that are useful to you. So don't turn your back on the vendors entirely. Understand that they're a tool like everything else.
And are you using AI for a lot of research these days?
I do. I Claude a lot. I use that with the understanding that it can be wrong. So I look at what they cite as their sources, and then I go to the source to verify. Don't ever rely on AI to give you your whole message. Understand that it can not have the complete picture. So I'll also I even use Copilot. I'll use multiple AIs, ask the same question of them or variations on the same question. And again, see what you get as a common frame of reference. And then you can generally be okay there, but also always verify.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Yep.
Well, Clete, we spent the first half learning from you, and we'd like to spend a little time learning about you. So tell us a little bit about your journey into cybersecurity. Is it like a lot of us old timers that just fell into it? What was your path?
My part was accidental. The part on the person that got me in it was very intentional. Back in the early 90s, I'd been in the military and government service for 15 years, and I had IT responsibilities there, as well as other responsibilities in the intelligence community. But when I decided to leave, I started putting my resume out, and my initial thought was I was going to do force protection. I was going to travel with executives and keep them safe wherever they went. But my resume somehow landed on the president of mainframe operations at a bank in Atlanta. And he was tasked with standing up, and this will age me a little bit, a client server group. They had never had one. Windows 3.1 was new and an unknown, and OS2 was a thing. They were the two. OS2 was the desktop choice for the bank, and Windows 3.1 was nipping at the heels trying to get in. But they knew they wanted to do NetWare. They knew they wanted to do, or they knew that there was direction from the business to do NetWare. Let me put it that way. The mainframe guy did not want to do it. He wanted to keep everything on the mainframe where he had predictable billing cycles and he made lots of money for his group. So he saw my resume and he saw that I wanted to do force protection, but he saw computer on the resume. So he said, let me talk to this guy. And he, and I understood when he interviewed me that he wanted me to fail. He was bringing me in specifically to fail. So when I accepted the job, I went and bought, at the time, the one NetWare book and the 2 Unix books that existed. And they were all 3 O'Reilly books. And I read them. And I read the ones on Windows. 2 weeks passed, I get up to get there. And as soon as I step in the door, I am now the resident expert on all 3 of them. At least I understand what's going on with them. But inside of a year, I'd taken 30% of the mainframe's business. Now, this was way back when, so, it was very simplistic setups, client-server setups. But I also stood up the bank's first web server. So the guy decided, okay, let me make him fail. I'm going to call in one of the big accounting firms, and I'm going to have him do an audit on the web server. He'll surely fail. Well, at the time, if you just followed the instructions in the O'Reilly book, you knew as much as any of the accounting firms did. So I had set up everything exactly the way it should have been set up. So I passed with flying colors. At the time, that was kind of an easy thing to do, but the mainframe guy didn't know that. But during that conversation, the guys at the accounting firm said, you just don't have a knack for this. Have you ever thought about just getting into security and getting away from IT? I said, well, I'd consider it. And they introduced me to a friend of theirs that was working at Security First Network Bank. And they were setting up the first internet banking applications. So I brought to him, he brought me over to work in the security consulting group. And, we did a lot of implementations in various banks, things of that nature. But out of that, ordered my global security, cybersecurity journal. But I had to take a short detour to go back to IT because our data center was hemorrhaging money. Because we were a cost plus contract with a third party, and they were buying new servers every time they stood up a new client, even if the client only had 20 customers. So I quickly turned that around, led to the company doing very well for a short amount of time, and I immediately cashed in all my options. But that led to more roles in security. I eventually left there and came back there twice. They brought me back twice to do things, business continuity. And then I came back to fix their third party, risk management program. But that led to me working for other banks, around the country. I got a reputation in financial services, started working a lot of, projects for them. And after that, I just started focusing on what's next. What was the next thing that was going to cause us problems? I mentioned Greenwich Bliley, HIPAA, whatever was coming along the way. I did all the research I could, found out everything I could, because I knew at that stage, I knew more than 90% of the people I was going to talk to. At the time I had built bridges with researchers, so I couldn't get that far ahead of it. But that's been where I focused is on what's next and how to improve processes and people to the point where what we do becomes second nature instead of reactionary.
Mm-hmm. And I think you mentioned earlier, so you're a security architect today. So what does that entail? What is your role these days?
Oh, it's easy and complex at the same time. What I do, I can describe in a sentence. I look at our current security posture and figure out how we need to adapt to be ready for the future. Now, what that means on a daily basis is we look at, for instance, every new project that's coming in. And we look at it not only from the lens of, are you meeting our current requirements today, but we try to warn people, this is a future risk that we need to start addressing. As we're moving down our zero trust journey, we're starting to drive our requirements instead of looking for compliance with our requirements. We're establishing new requirements that aren't in our standards yet. So my job is to be future looking and to design our security systems so that they're ready for the next challenge, not necessarily what the challenge is today. But I also spend time with the engineers to figure out how to do what they're doing today better to deal with today's problems.
Yeah, makes sense. Clete, I think one thing you may have left out is that you have a new book coming out. Is this true? Can you tell us about it?
I do. It's the title is Building Zero Trust Foundation with Tools You Already Have. If you haven't picked up during the conversation, I'm a big believer in starting where you are, not deciding you want to do it and then go hiring a vendor to do it for you, because that is a recipe for disaster. Almost universally, if you go trying to use a vendor, you're going to fail because everything else will not keep up with where you're going with the vendor. So that book's coming out. It is dealing with standing up your initial zero trust architecture. It's not about maturing it. It's not about becoming compliant with CISA or doing all of the SANS model or all of the CSA model. It's what can you do today and how can you define what your future needs to look like tomorrow. So that's the focus of this book. I'm hoping it's as successful as other things I've done in the past, and hopefully it'll be of some help to people in this journey, because it is a complex journey.
And we'll try to find a way to put a link in when we post this, so if people want to grab it, they can easily access it. The other thing I think you told us about earlier, before we got on here was you had a lot of content that I think class content that people could download and use.
Yeah. I have an effort based on a book I wrote over the Christmas holidays last year. The book's called Secure by Habit. It's cybersecurity for everyday people. And part of what I'm trying to do is get other cybersecurity professionals to pick this up as a purpose. We have been given so much in cybersecurity by our society. And we all get questioned repeatedly, what can I do to make myself safer online? So I wrote the book in everyday language for people that breaks down into 10 habits. And I developed some courseware that follows the book that you can teach to your community. That is on my website as well. And I encourage people to teach it. I encourage people to help me translate it into more languages. We've already translated it in English and Spanish. But if another native speaker wants to help me with translating the material to another language so that other security professionals can teach it in their native language, I'd be delighted. Because this is something I really do feel is important that we do as cybersecurity professionals.
Clete, that's fantastic. I think it's great you're doing that for the community, and I thought that was really cool when you mentioned that when we had our free call and just giving back to the community. So thank you for doing that. I think it's fantastic.
All right, let's so that was interesting learning a little bit about you, but there's one other area we'd like to learn about, and that's are you a smoker?
Now we're talking about barbecue.
We are talking about barbecue, yes.
I live in Texas. I'm not a native Texan, but I live in Texas, so I have to have at least one smoker. I have 3. And they all serve different purposes for me. But yeah, I love to barbecue. I love to cook in general. Barbecue is one of the skills I've kind of taken on as wanting to master in the last several years. And I think I've gotten some recipes that resonate with people, but are different. I'm not going to fix a barbecue that's just traditional Texas barbecue. I can go down to the local barbecue restaurant, get that. I prefer to do things with unexpected ingredients and unexpected flavor profiles that enhance to me and aren't what you might get down the street.
Nice. Do you enter any competitions, or have you ever done the competitive side of barbecue?
I don't. With what I'm doing between Secure by Habit and also I do make my own music that I post as well, and various public service, community service activities. I don't have time to compete. I've always got that. I can compete and probably do pretty well, but I'm not going to compete. It's just not something that I'm ever going to bite off.
Well, hey, I need to know more about these smokers. So are they offsets? Are they pellet grills? Or what are we talking about?
I've got an offset, I've got a pellet, and an electric. Now, when I tell people I have electric, a lot of times they'll turn up their nose to it. But let me tell you one advantage an electric has over everything else. I can set it and forget it. So if I'm cooking really low, really slow, I can do all the smoke. You cannot get a smoke ring unless you job the activity with a electric smoker, but you can get the cooking process done. So a lot of times what I'll start in the offset or start in the pellet, and then overnight I'll move it into the electric smoker and let it just cook and do its thing there. I don't use crutches usually in most of my barbecues. So if you don't know what a Texas crutch is, it's when the meat reaches about 165 degrees, it will have a tendency to stall at that temperature for a long until it finally gets past that. And then it'll get up to the 205 we're typically looking for. A Texas crutch, you wrap aluminum foil around it so that it concentrates the heat on the meat and gets it through that stall faster. And if I'm doing that, it's because I started too late. But I typically because I like bark. And I like my bark very crispy. I like it very pronounced. A crutch will diminish that to some degree. But I prefer not to use a crutch. I prefer that crust. And if you like burnt ends on your barbecue, pork barbecue, then you know what I'm talking about. You want that. You want that bark.
What's your favorite recipe? What's your favorite thing to cook?
I think right now, my favorite recipe is my pineapple mango habanero sauce with smoked baby backs. Um, it's a quick one. You know, it only takes about 5 hours to do. The flavor profile of the rub, it is enhanced by the barbecue sauce, and the two were developed side by side. And I like to do that. I like to match my rubs to my sauces. This one comes out really well, and you can use it on pork butt as well. But it's currently my favorite. But I've always liked pineapple. I've always liked mango, and who doesn't like habanero?
Sounds great.
If you're willing to share, we might have to get that recipe from you. I'm just hungry right now. Jeez, that sounds fantastic. Well, Clete, if people want to get in touch with you, where can they get in touch with you? And you mentioned a website, so if you could tell people about the website, list out the things. So if people want to know about the book, all that, let us know. Tell us where they find you.
You can find me on the web at cletetaylor.com. Real easy. And if you want to send me an email there, it's hello@cletetaylor.com. Try to keep it very simple. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can find me under Clete Taylor there. And you can always email me directly at cletetaylor13@live if you don't want to use my website. That's the easiest way to get in touch with me. You can also email me at Frostbank. It's clete.taylor@frostbank.com. I'll see it one of those ways.
Oh, that's great. And then the published book is on Amazon, I assume?
Virtual copies, the online copies are on Amazon now of Secure My Habit. That's both in English and Spanish. The print books are in the process of getting put into the systems now. You can also buy print books through my website, and I will have the EPUB versions on the website by the end of this week for Secure My Habit. I will have a placeholder for the next book and the follow-on 2. Trying to get 3 out this year to take you fully through the Zero Trust journey. I'm getting old, so I want to get it done. So I can move on to my next challenge. But that's where you can find them now.
That's awesome. Well, this has been a fascinating discussion, Clete, and really enjoyed hearing about your journey and about all the things to do with Zero Trust and the contributions you're making back to the community through your books and other work. So thank you very much for being on the show.
It's been my pleasure.
And thank you, audience. If you've learned something today or laughed, tell someone about this podcast. Thanks again, Clete. This has been another exciting episode of the Cyber Smokehouse. We'll see you next time.
And that wraps another episode. Thank you for joining. For show notes and other episodes, visit us at cybersmokehouse.com. Cyber Smokehouse is sponsored by TBD Cyber, a cybersecurity strategy consulting firm.
TBD Cyber works with organizations to assess their security program, develop and implement security initiatives, and optimize their security investments. We work in areas as broad as data security, risk management, cyber resilience, and security architecture. Our clients value us for our extensive expertise and independent advice, which is why we do not sell security products or deliver managed security services. If you want to work with a trusted advisor, we can help. You can learn more at tbdcyber.com. We'll see you on the next one.